All right, I'm good, Brandon. Here we go. Let me just get this right there. Boom, we're ready. Lord be with us. Thanks, Terry. Well, hello, everybody. I think we are now streaming for book club, and it is going to be a special night. Welcome to Red Letter Christians Book Club. If you're a regular around here, welcome back. If this is your first book club, you're extremely welcome. And let me tell you, as you settle in, I'll introduce Terry in just a minute. But this is a special book that we're going to be talking about tonight, Christian Citizenship. Before we jump into that, let me tell you, there's some stuff going on. We are getting ready to launch a new project, which we're really pumped about. Red Letter Christians is teaming up with a whole bunch of other folks, organizations, and people around the country, a few international folks, to launch the National Peacemaker Association. You're going to hear all about it, but you can also join us in 2 days for morning prayer at 9 a.m. on August 1st. We do morning prayer every month on the first of the month, and we're going to have a ton of really great folks on that call. So join us as we pray for peace and then put feet on our prayers by launching the NPA. Whoop, whoop. Then we got next month's book club. I want to make sure you know we got, I don't know if once you're a canon, you're always a canon, but her title is officially, I think, the Reverend Dr. Canon, Stephanie Spellers. That's a fancy Episcopal title, but she is just a pastor, prophetic woman, really great friend of Red Letter Christians. This is hot off the press. Her book, Church Tomorrow. The best place to get it is right off of our website at Red Letter Christians. So you can go to redletterchristians.org and get all of our books, all kinds of books, including Terry's if you don't already have it. And we're going to be giving a few away tonight, Terry. So the other thing that you may know about, and some of you may not, is we're excited to have a part of our whole God Loves Gaza campaign has been the Peace Communion Project. And so what we have are communion sets with a chalice and a plate that are made in Hebron, the holy ancient city where Abraham and Sarah are buried, also a city that is suffering deeply from the violence of the occupation right now in the West Bank. But there are some family-owned businesses that we are really delighted to support. And part of the point of it is to remember the suffering of Jesus as the Prince of Peace, in solidarity with the suffering people of our world, and particularly we think of Palestine and Gaza right now. So there's a little liturgy kit that comes with it, so you can check all that out on our website. But we just got these, like 50 more. That's the Lord's Prayer in Arabic on there, and so you can get those. And there's another design of the fish and the loaves that you can see, and so that's happening right now. The other thing, I think this is the last thing I want to make sure you know about, is that we have now opened up registration for our annual Peacemaker Summit. So that's here in Philly. We host, and I mean, if you need another excuse to come to the City of Love, then this is it. And we'll be gathering for 3 days, 3 or 4 days actually in October. We fire up the forges and melt guns down, but we also have all kinds of workshops and conversations and breakout groups thinking about real practical peacemaking, nonviolent direct action, what it looks like to be a conscientious objector to war. We had a panel last year on restorative justice, so it's very, practical and real, and there's amazing people from all over that come. And if you come, it'll be even better. So check it all out. You can register there. And let me get out of this and just say, Terry, thank you for being our special guest and for your book that came out earlier this year. And you are you're pastoral counselor, but you've also done some history work and theology in this sucker. You've spent some time, doing trainings in other countries. You write about that. You've written other stuff, but we're real excited about this one. And I also was corrected earlier, y'all. It is Terry Webb's 94th year. But she's 93 right now. She hadn't quite hit 94 mark. But I was saying, you don't even know because you just act like you're as Tony Campolo said, we're as young as our dreams and as old as our cynicism. So I hope I'm still writing books when I'm 93 years old. And you've got some other books I'm understanding that are brewing. So we're going to talk all about it. But thank you for doing it, first of all.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for all your help. You've been an inspiration in the whole writing process, and thank you for all the people that have helped.
Yeah, and we were kind of did this on purpose. We invited two of my our dear friends, but also they are folks that work with Red Letter Christians. And Susan Wood is here tonight, whoop, whoop, from down south and down deep down in the south. And Casey Fristow is also joining us from Tennessee with the family there, seeing the whole crew. What's up? And you give them a shout out in the book. And
Certainly
this
do.
was sort of
I
a
mean,
teamwork makes the dream work. So say a little bit about it.
well, I mean, it wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for you. And your book, Jesus for President, is I've quoted frequently in the book because I looked at why God chose to send His Son to a country which was occupied by the Roman Empire and under Herod, who was so horrible. Um, so I quote some of the things that you wrote about in Jesus for President.
That's
And I
sweet.
just
Yeah,
want to say how wonderful, helpful Susan was, and all the work that she did, and also Casey. It's been great. I couldn't have done it. It was a community effort. Let's put it that way.
well, when you pitch this idea out, it's not easy to publish these days. And a lot of people go the route of self-publishing because a lot of the publishers rely on the authors and the platform. In fact, it's a regular vetting mechanism right now to even consider a book proposal, how many followers you have on social media. So it's a bit of a shame that sometimes the content of a book doesn't matter as much as how big of a platform you have. And so it was really beautiful to have Susan help out because we were able to really kind of champion the book and get it in the shape that it's in now, and to get a publisher to stand behind it. And it also helps it be more affordable and get out there a little bit more. So Susan, talk a little bit. I mean, Susan's always really like doesn't need to toot her horn or anything, but you put a lot of love into this. And so thanks. And just say a little bit about it, like, the process of reading an early manuscript and then helping it come into the shape it is now.
Well, no, I don't like to toot my horn, but I'm going to toot Terry's horn really a little bit. She's probably one of the best authors that I have ever encountered because I've edited a lot of books. And when I saw that manuscript, I thought, you don't need me. I mean, there were a few little errors, but she had just done such a wonderful job, like in footnoting everything. It made it easy. She actually made it easy for me to edit it, but it was enjoyable, and I really appreciate the scholarship and effort and love that she put into it. And I wanted to pour just a little bit of my own to that and make a little typo correction here and there, but there really wasn't much. She's just amazing. And even more so, I guess, too, considering how long you've been around here. I've been around a little while myself too, but it's just amazing how sharp you are. And I want to toot your horn for everybody to know. It's a good book. It is definitely worth the read. That's all.
Thank you for all your help, and it was Susan's help that really we helped get Whippenstock to publish it because I don't think they would have done it if it hadn't been for your help on that too. But that it's been an interesting publisher to work with. Just say that. And now I found out, like Shane says, if you publish a book, you have to do all these other things in order to get it out there, right?
It's a
But
Yeah,
lot of work.
Whipfenstock, I can remember I did a book with them. I've supported a lot of projects that they've done with, other friends and stuff. And we did a book or two with them. But I can remember like being at a gathering and someone was like, "Hey, I'm John Stock." I'm like, "Oh, you the Stock of Whipfenstock." And so it's a really small, but like
Oh,
family, it's a community-based publisher. And so they've really I've seen them step up based on the content of a book because they believe in it. And I know they did that for you. So before we dive into the conversation, Terry, I want to also recognize Casey because sometimes, like we've always said Red Letter Christians is a web of subversive friends. And part of that means that we can do stuff together that we believe in. And Casey is really great at that. Like just saying, this isn't really on anybody's job description, but it just feels like the right thing to do. It's awesome. Let's do it. So I don't know if you're going to say, I want you to say a little something, Casey, but you had a hand in all this. You're doing, so much stuff. We're just kind of rolling with it. That's the beauty of a little like organization that can move, but we wouldn't be who we are without Casey over there. So thanks for say a little something, Casey.
Okay, well, that's fine. I mean, Susan did a lot to help with Terry's book. I mean, I've really enjoyed getting to connect with you, Terry. And I mean, I guess one thing I will say is, I've helped coordinate some of, like Terry did a podcast with Shane recently that folks can check out if you haven't already. And Terry sent a lot of materials over in advance to help guide it. And Terry, I was really struck and I've continued to sit with one of the documents you shared. I think you framed it as like highs and lows, looking back over your life. And yeah, I just think I found it very inspiring. I just turned 38, so I'm in a different season of my life. I've got a couple of kids running around here, and I think the opportunity to see someone in a later season of their life being so thoughtful as they looked back felt very inspiring to me to think about what are the ways that I can be building in kind of that way of thinking in this season of my life as well. So that's something that I'll say that I've enjoyed in this process. And yeah, that's it.
I believe in community, and I think it's wonderful being part of this community. I just share that with you. So, and I do believe that God calls you at certain seasons of life to do things that you wouldn't expect to do. I didn't expect to write a book like this, except that God called me to do it. So I dedicated it in church, and the church has been really supportive and have sent out a notice about this. I hope there's some people on the call from or got the message. So. Anyway, it's we when I have to share something with you. When they introduced the book in the church, um, there was a retired pastor in the congregation, and he came out and he said, "God called me. I'm part of a retired clergy group that meets regularly, and I want to buy copies of the book for everybody in the retired clergy." And even though the book is geared really for lay people and not for clergy, it was really interesting. That was an affirmation for me that yes, God did want me to write it.
So
So
good. Well, I will say, like, while we're at it, just like the podcast that you and I did, Terry. Caleb is the person behind that, and it's just a wonderful group. And here's the thing: all of us are going to be together from like all of our different states in October. Lord willing, we're still
yeah,
here, rocking and rolling. We're going to be together. Terry came last year; and it's coming again, and we'll all be at the Peacemaker Summit. Maybe, might even get Brandon. He's behind the scenes doing the live stream and all that. But we got to get you out here too, Brandon. So, but it's really really special to do this work with such good friends, and you dedicated this book, Terry. As we dive into it, you dedicated it to uh, Tony Campolo and another
like
person, right? Another
yes,
mentor.
he was my grandfather. He was a bishop of Michigan, and he was called after he died the prophet of peace and justice. So I kind of like picked up that mantle and carrying on his work in a sense. That's been my life.
So Charles Williams and Tony Campolo and um, the book for folks that haven't, you know what, we might as well give the first one away. Let's just say this: there's folks that are tuning in on all the different live streams on some are on YouTube and Facebook and different things. Some are on the website, Terry. So I'm going to give you a chance in a little bit to give a book away. You can think about how you want to do that, but let's do two right now. We'll say if you've got a birthday this week, we might even push it a little bit. If you've got a birthday within 2 weeks of today, before or after, then send us a message and we will get your address. You don't need to put your address, but send us your email or put it in the notes. Like, I got a birthday this, coming up, or I just had one, and we will send you a copy. Brandon is watching the chats. The other one, why don't we give a book away to someone who's over 70 years old? If you're over 70 and you don't already have it and you want it, or you want a copy to give to a friend, throw us a little note in the chat or give us your email. So you've kind of created this God's plan, introducing God's plan, God's domain, church and state, troubling examples. You kind of brought this down, but then you get to the church and state in America, citizenship revisited. Those are the different sections of the book. But as you like were thinking about this book, I always like to ask, like, why this book now? I mean, at 93, you've got plenty of things you could be doing, sipping martinis on the beach or playing, I don't know, whatever. Like, but you decided to write this book. It's kind of the fire in your bones. And say a little bit more about why you felt so compelled to write it, or as you said, called even. Yeah.
Well, okay, being a lifelong Christian and a follower of Jesus, I began to see what was happening to those who say they're Christian, and what was, Christian nationalism that is rearing its ugly head, and I was very concerned about that, and so I started the book with the creed, all right, because people don't understand. People in the pew today, particularly those in more Pentecostal or charismatic churches, don't really have the history of Christianity that I think is very important to understand the history of Christianity. So I did start with the creed and talked about why the creeds were formed was because of a lot of the heresies in the church. And so I have a whole chapter on eschatology, which is a theory of the end times. And just for your listening audience, eschatology there are different forms of eschatology. And the church has always believed that when Jesus died, he talked a lot about the kingdom of heaven. Well, I changed that to either kingdom or the domain of God, because in America we don't have kings. So I wanted to kind of change
At
the
least in
language.
theory. Yeah, that's right. With some people trying to bring it back. I won't name names, but keep going, Terry.
Yeah. Anyway, so kingdom really is a form of what a church should be, which is a congregation of people who are in a community, just very much like Red Letter Christians is.
Mhm.
And I think that was God's that was Jesus's intention. And his intention was, he said he would return, but you're not supposed to be concerned about returning. And what's happened in the United States that I began to discover is there is an extreme form of Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism has been with us, throughout centuries and in various different forms. But this form of Christian nationalism, which is a new apostolic reformation, believes that we're living in the end times, and we have to usher in end times. So it's almost like it's not God's domain, it's man's domain, and they have chosen to change the institutions of our society, and many of them are working for this current administration. So when I began to see that was a real danger. And I felt we needed to focus on who Jesus is, what he had to say, what the early Christians endured, what kind of a lifestyle that we need to be following as followers of Jesus. And what I began to see is that everything that's happening in this country is motivated by this kind of extreme form of Christian nationalism. And that's really what I talked about. And I also wrote about Christian Zionism, which is what's happening and been very concerned about what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank. And the West Bank, as you said earlier, I've been in a prayer group with those who are from the Bethlehem Institute, and having understood that what's happening is Christian Zionism means that after the Second World War, and by the way, I lived my early life during the Second World War. So, and I've also spent a lot of time in Russia. So that's church and state issues. But
Yeah. I want us to talk about your time in Russia because you write about it, and I know it was very, very formative of you and seeing some of these, principalities and powers and things. But the last thing that you said, that struck me when I was reading your book, when you're like, you know, the power of being 93 years old and writing, like thinking of what you've lived through. It's not just kind of cool that you wrote a book at 93, but it's powerful because you write about, I remember when Israel was established as a modern state,
right.
because you were like in high school or something, right? You remember when Hal Lindsey's book came out, the late great Planet Earth, where we got,
Right.
enamored with the idea of rapture and, all this, like you've kind of lived through these eras that some of us have read about. I mean, I remember Kirk Cameron in like the Left Behind series, but that doesn't count. That's not nearly as cool, So I think like, say just a little bit about how it really adds another layer of depth to your writing when you're not just reflecting on history from a distance, but having lived through it.
Well, I also, when I was in high school, that was the time that the Scopes trial was what was going on. So I had got very interested in the Scopes trial because I was interested in studying science at the time. And then I had to wrestle with my own, like my own faith issues and science. And we're seeing that today all over the place. So, so I got interested in the Scopes trial, but when I was in Russia, I went to when Russia wasn't Russia, it was the former Soviet Union. So I started there as a leading short-term mission teams and spent about 10 years going back and forth leading short-term mission teams. So I got to understand the Russian people very well. And then we had a German visitor who stayed with us for a while. So I understood the German people and their reaction to Nazi Germany. So I focused on, in the book, I focused on what happens when church and state become intertwined, and that's what happened. That's what's happening in Russia. What happened in Russia. What happened in Germany. So if you have to understand the background of what's happened, you have to also understand the heresies and how the church has fought against the heresies. Mm-hmm. And in America, because we are a country that says that the Bill of Rights gives us the right to worship in any way we want to, but all throughout even our history, there's been this element of church nationalism, but it's not been to the extreme that it is today.
Yeah, and the extreme of that is what's now known as the New Apostolic Reformation, the NAR, and there's folks that are writing books about that. There's folks in that are writing books, all of it shaping kind of the narrative and theology and landscape of American Christianity. But that might be new for some folks, and so give just you paint. Late in the book, you kind of paint a little bit of a picture of that. Say just a little bit more about the New Apostolic Reformation and why it's so dangerous.
Well, when there are different terms in terms of amillennialism, premillennialism, dispensationalism. You talked about the rapture. So there have been different streams of millennialism in church history. But this particular group, the church has always believed that when Jesus rose and went to heaven, he left the Holy Spirit and created the age of the church, is what we call the age of the church. That's called amillennialism. But this particular group has decided we are in a second apostolic age, and they self-proclaim prophets and apostles, and we're living in the end times. We're in a spiritual warfare. It's very prevalent in the area where I live, and there are churches that Stephanie McEwen has written about it. So it's very scary, and a lot of the people that are some of the people that I mentioned in the book and the current administration are involved in some of these groups.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's violence at its core. We're living in the end times, so we're going to usher in a time when Jesus can come again. We're going to make that decision ourselves. So we're going to do away with we're going to change the media. Their 7 mountain mandate means there's seven institutions in the United States that we're going to be. The United States is really culturally an evil place. So we're in a spiritual warfare, and we're going to usher in the end times so Jesus can come again. And we're going to do away with all of these evil institutions in our culture.
Yeah,
And that's happening. And that's happening.
When people think of some of the more political figures like Charlie Kirk, and the way that it's blurred sort of spirituality and theology and politics, how do these pieces of Turning Point and the NAR kind of fit together? Say a little bit more about that.
Well, I do quote, and I'm thankful to other scholars who have researched this better than I have, but Charlie Kirk was very influential in introducing the Trump family to this whole idea, and that was so he was very instrumental in getting the Trump family and those working in the administration. And Paula White Cain, who is the head of the faith. She's the head of the faith office in the White House now, is one of those prophets, self-proclaimed prophets. And during the first administration, the first Trump administration, they actually came and prayed over Trump all the time. So now he claims he's one of them. And Hegseth is very much involved in one of those. And they're all different parts, different aspects of this new apostolic reformation. It's very scary.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it isn't based on Jesus's teachings at all. It's using the name of Jesus, which actually make me furious as a Christian.
Some of it is reshaping Jesus, right? As George Bernard Shaw said, God created us in his image, and we decided to return the favor. So you end up creating, as Kristen Dumas says, the John Wayne Jesus, or the Jesus that's literally carrying an AR-15. But as you said, like that's not like, it's nothing brand new, but it is a really disturbing new iteration and emboldening and massive money that is behind some of this. But just to flash back a little bit to the 1990s and 2000, when we were starting the Simple Way. Mark Driscoll was a part of some of the emerging church movement, and it had a different version of sort of militant. I don't even want to call it Christianity, but it's militant theology, right? And
it's militant theology. It's not Christianity, because we're peacemakers. We don't believe in bombing and guns and things like that. So
let me just read you this quote from Mark. I know Mark very, very well, and we've spent many days together that are awkward sometimes, but I can remember asking him if I could use this quote, and I said I'm probably going to put a big question mark over it, but I want to quote it accurately. And so this was the quote: "Some emerging types want to recast Jesus as a limp-wristed hippie in a dress with a lot of product in his hair, who drank decaf and made Zen statements about life while shopping for the perfect pair of shoes. But in Revelation, Jesus is a prize fighter with a tattoo down his leg, a sword in his hand, and the commitment to make someone bleed. That's a guy I can worship. I cannot worship the hippie diaper halo Christ, because I cannot worship a guy that I can beat up." So obviously really problematic. Including the fact that Jesus doesn't have a sword in his hand, but a sword coming out of his mouth. It's very important that it was not really meant to be Jesus coming
You
in.
think about the bombing of all the boats on in the South Pacific and in the Caribbean. I mean, they're bombing. It hasn't done anything. They just killed a lot of people. And
Yeah,
then look at what happened in Iran. It's just throwing bombs around, and they've done away with gun controls. That really got to me
yeah,
when they got away. All of a sudden having guns is a big deal,
yeah. So
which
let's
defeats what you're trying to do. So.
yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the hope because you're not just diagnosing the problem, but you're still really devoted to your faith. In fact, I think there's a power in refusing to allow that kind of militant theology to contaminate all of Christianity, which is obviously the heartbeat of red letter Christians, to try to live like Jesus meant the things he said, to center the Sermon on the Mount, to reorient our lives around the Beatitudes. Like that's kind of what our heartbeat is, as you know. And and yet it's understandable that so many young folks in particular want to leave the church because that the kind of the Trump evangelicalism often does so much damage to the reputation of the Christian faith. Um, so, some new statistics have really shown how alarming this is, that there's folks that kind of conflate the Trump evangelicalism with all of Christianity. So why would they want anything to do with that? As if like, all of Islam was just the folks that are doing violence in the name of their faith. Like there's every religion has been twisted to try to bless violence. And yet, like, you kind of refuse to give up on Jesus because of the embarrassing things that Christians have done and said. So I wanted you to say a little bit more about, that 93-year-old faith that keeps clinging to Jesus, even despite the really terrible versions of Christianity or, pseudo Christianity that are out there.
We've lost a sense of creedal Christianity, which has been there for 2,000 years, and all of a sudden it's a new creed, masculinity. We got to put testosterone in terms of our armed sources. We've got to get rid of women. We've got to get rid of blacks. All these things that are just everything that happens just really makes me even more concerned. But I think I wrote the book because I would like to see every Christian, everybody who calls themselves a Christian in mainline churches to read it, so that they can understand what's happening.
Mm,
Because we've lost a sense, we've become too enamored of acquiring wealth. We've allowed the wealthy to walk away with their what do we have, a trillionaire or a billionaire or something like that. I mean, they don't contribute to society at all. And in my generation, even if you had like the Mellons and the Fords, if you had money, you contributed back to society. That's not happening anymore.
mm, mm.
And I think that's very tragic.
Yeah, I even had to update a statistic. I used to say 100 millionaires own the same amount as half the world's country, half the world's population, over, nearly 4 billion people. And that statistic went down to 50. I was just told it's less than 20 now, 20 individuals that own the same amount as half the world. And there's, single individuals that own more than entire countries. So yeah, I mean, it's a time of wealth disparity that we've never seen. And some of it is folks that are claiming to follow Jesus, who said, sell everything you have and give it to the poor. So,
I think the really tragic part of this is, I think, this is a group, this New Apostolic Reformation, that wants to make America a Christian nation, but it's not Christianity.
yeah,
It's a political movement. It's not the domain of God. It's the domain of man. It's man trying, it's men who are corrupt, who trying to make the into their image, not God, not the way Jesus would want it at all.
Yeah, I heard someone say if you're pursuing all of the things that Jesus rejected when the devil offered them to him in the desert, you might be a Christian nationalist, because it was power,
Yeah,
it was
right.
spectacle,
Give
it
the
was
power, right. That's what I
all of
thought
that.
too.
Like, and Jesus saying, like, what good is it to gain the whole world and lose your soul? And that's what we see in real time. But you show a lot of really beautiful. We should give a book away. It's your turn, Terry. You get to give a book away. By the way, we've got Linda. We see you, 71 years old. We got a book coming to you.
Good. Oh,
Or
Linda,
no,
that's
Paul's
great.
71. Linda's over. So we got 2 books we've given out. We've got somebody. If your birthdays, we've got 3 or 4 books. You give one away now, Terry.
Okay. I can make the terms of giving away. All right.
Yes, you
I'd
can be
like
as
to give
creative as you
somebody
want.
who's active in their church.
Okay, sweet. Tell us how you're actively participating in your local church community. We'll give 2 books away for that. How about it?
Yeah,
So send us
that's
your
good.
email, and Brandon's watching the comments. By the way, Susan and Casey that have been listening in, if you want to jump in at any point, you're very welcome to. You've spent some time with the book as well. Um, but and if anybody that's watching, if you want to throw a question for Terry or
Yeah,
a reflection,
please.
we're watching those as well. So we've got a couple Facebook winners. Boom. Thanks, Cole. We love giving stuff away. So talk a little bit about the charismatic side of you, because you're kind of this fusion of interesting. You got the creedal thing going. You've also I always say when I got involved in the charismatic movement, there were some bones that I needed to spit out, but there was also some stuff that I've really hung on to. And so I appreciate the liturgy, the sacramental traditions, the smells and bells, as they say. But also there's stuff I love about the Quaker tradition and the silence and the discernment. And I still love so much of the charismatic, miracles,
So do I.
supernatural. So say a little bit more about that,
Oh
Terry.
yeah, I went through the charismatic movement. I was very involved in it when I lived in Pittsburgh. That's when it started at Duquesne University, and I was very active in the charismatic movement. I actually joined, became a lay leader, a lay healer with laying hands on people. I even spoke in tongues at some point. There's a lot of good in the charismatic movement. But what's happened today is we have churches that are charismatic or Pentecostal, and those are the fastest growing churches in our country, but they don't have the depth. I mean, I think what happened, I still am charismatic in my worship style and raise my hands in worship and things like
I
that.
can
I'm
see
probably
you
the
getting
only
holy
one in my
rolling, dancing
congregation.
down that aisle. I can see it.
I don't dance down the aisle, but I do raise my hands in worship. I've gotten courage in I sing in a choir, but sometimes I raise my hands. Anyway, I think, it's the depth. If you've been through that and you have a deep faith and you really, and I call the Beatitudes the compass, that's what Jesus talked about in the Sermon on the Mount, was really, this is what I want you. These are the things that I think you will make you a good follower of mine. And we all try to do that, but we don't succeed all the time. But I just think we've lost that. We've lost the fact that Christians in the early centuries were suffering for their faith. In fact, all of the disciples, except Paul, were martyred in some way.
Yeah.
So following Jesus, there's a cost to following Jesus. And I don't think in this country we've gotten so used to our material comforts, we don't know how to really rock the boat, to really get out there and say, and do something. The tendency in some of the circles I run in is we don't want to talk politics, or that's not up to us. You can't talk politics. Um, so we've got to take a look at what's happening in the world, and particularly in this country, if we're going to make any difference.
Mhm. Um, when when you look at some of the in the end of the book, you kind of point a way forward by celebrating what faithful discipleship looks like, what it looks like to live a life of compassion and justice. And um, uh, there's Mother Teresa, St. Francis, if you know, and Bonhoeffer, you kind of look to. Say a little bit more. I've always liked how Frederick Buechner said, all a saint is when God drops a handkerchief from heaven to leave the scent of heaven on earth. And so there are folks that smell like God's love in the world. And Buechner kind of said that's what saints are like. They're just that scent of God on earth. So say a little bit more about some of the people that have inspired you, because I'm trying to think of. I mean, do you remember when Bonhoeffer was alive and at, let's see, he would have been at Union. I was trying to think when he spent his year in America, but say a little bit more about, I mean, obviously you remember Mother Teresa, but
Well,
say a little
Mother
bit more about
Teresa
that.
was one of my models too,
Yeah.
and as yours. And I just think Bonhoeffer, it's interesting because Rob Schenck who wrote the foreword for the book, is head of the Bonhoeffer Society, and he's done a complete about face in terms of his faith. He came through as very evangelical and has ended up, now he's up there in Maine talking to clergy to see what they can do about the ice killing that was up there. So he's become a real model of mine. The fact that he wrestled with his faith. He even wrestled with his faith when he was in prison, and he actually wasn't part of the plot. I just found this out from Rob. He wasn't part of the plot to kill Hitler, but he not until later in life he ended up being killed when he was in prison, but he wasn't sent to prison for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
But he started a group like Red Letter Christians, where he tried to bring people together to learn what it was really like and what was happening in Germany.
Yeah, I don't know
You
if
know,
you did book club with us, Terry, when we did Reggie Williams, Bonhoeffer's Black Jesus, but it added a whole new dimension, of scholarship and depth to Bonhoeffer. That part of his radicalization was the Abyssinian church in Harlem and the Harlem
right? Yeah.
Renaissance, and Black liberation theology really was a part of what gave Bonhoeffer eyes to see, fascism and Hitler and hope and resistance in a new way.
Mhm.
But that was really great. Yeah.
So
Did you? Yeah. Go ahead.
no, I was just saying I've been I've been very attracted to Bonhoeffer and what he stood for. I remember there was a play here in Lancaster where I live, um, that somebody wrote a play, and I went to the play and met some other people that were as concerned as I was. And there were just very few of us. The problem is that unless we live in a community like you live in, sometimes you're all alone, or you'll find a few other people that are concerned as you are, but each of us needs to make a difference. And we can do all kinds of things. In fact, I just wrote a letter to our Pennsylvania senator, because he was talking about Israel's support of Israel, and I'm very, very concerned about this particular government in Israel, which is really going after, really, it's genocide is what it is. In fact, there are a lot of churches that are beginning to look at that, which I'm very glad about.
Yeah.
But and I've talked to a number of people who have been in Palestine recently, and it is getting worse.
Yeah.
So we have to stand up for what's wrong in the world. We have to do something. One of them is continuing to be in touch with your congressmen and your senators. The other is what you're doing in terms of going to the Capitol and protesting and willing to go to jail. We all have to be willing to do that, I think. And that's
Yeah.
what's going to make a difference.
And On that note, there's a direct action in DC on Monday with Moral Mondays and repairs of the breach. And I just got pinged just to ask. Yeah, I've hit my frequent flyer. It's like the Monopoly. You can get out of jail free for a couple of times, and now I'm on my third strike, which isn't good in DC, Terry. You have different consequences. So anyway, I might go and pray and get up when they ask me to leave. But anyway, the I wanted you to say a little bit about where you see moral courage, because I feel like you've got this trajectory of having seen, Bobby Kennedy killed, having seen Dr. King killed, the cost. I mean, even Romero, right, in El Salvador, that was killed while serving communion. You remember that the U.S. was fueling that conflict in Central America, and especially in El Salvador. We were training those soldiers at School of the Americas that killed folks like Oscar Romero and the Jesuits and the Mary Noel sisters. And so when you look at moral courage and the risks that people have taken over the decades, say just a little bit about where you've seen that, and also like what that looks like for us right now to show that kind of courage.
I helped start the local Braver Angels in our community, and I do have a dialogue in the end of my book where you can begin to talk to each other and listen to each other.
I love the Braver Angels. Everybody may not know about it, so take just a minute to, I mean, tell a little.
Braver Angels is a movement, a growing movement in the United States of people who want to be able to dialogue with people on the other side. It's both Republicans and Democrats. Instead of calling each other names, to learn to listen to each other, and you don't try to change anybody, but you have to respect the other person. And I think that's what Jesus wants us to do. This is a very hard topic right now with Christian nationalism to do that, because most people who are Christian nationalists who are involved in the other party, they don't want to talk to you. But you have to be willing to listen. And I've had instances where I've had to really been called names and sit back and pray and try to listen to the other person and get to know them. And
Yeah.
I think that's Jesus's way, as far as I'm concerned. But it's not easy.
No, it's not. And there's the Braver Angels. There's also like Tim Shriver's founded the Dignity Index and the Dignity Forums now that are and actually these are partners with the National Peacemaker Association too. We're going to be partnering to try to model respectful conversation and disagreement, to team up. I was getting ready to say something that might not be, I don't think it's public yet, but there's going to be several really courageous conversations with people that disagree that I hope, Red Letter Christians will help amplify some of that. Because part of what's so heart-wrenching is some of the studies like More in Common have shown not only do we believe that our political or theological opponents are wrong, a disturbing number of people go so far to say not only are they wrong, but they're evil. There's something evil within them, and that becomes a really volatile, like kind of culture war or society to live in when almost half the population thinks that their opponents are not just wrong but evil. So
well, I think that the tendency is, I mean, I find myself doing the same thing as when things happen in the administration, and I think, well, that's evil. But I'd have to realize there's a difference about doing something that's wrong and being an evil person, because Jesus did teach us to love our enemies and to pray for those who disagree with us. And so there should be a core in each of us that God can reach and change, and we just have to be the spokesperson to help that happen. Even
so
a few things.
We got just a few minutes left, and people are very engaged on these social medias, and we'll give another book away in a minute, but Brandon's done a great job of showing the links to things like the Dignity Index and Braver Angels, even the Moral Mondays Action. You can see links to that. There's a good question that Wayne had on Facebook. He says, I've noticed a lot of comments such as the government isn't supposed to do the work of the church, to negate government policy that addresses social ills, or even cry, that church separation in that context. Can you say a little bit about this misrepresentation? So like, folks that say, well, welcoming immigrants, that's something we should do, in our personal lives, but it doesn't really translate into policy, or like it's not how the government should do anything. It doesn't, like, Jesus is kind of irrelevant to the
Well,
policy.
that gets me started on the church state issues.
Yeah, go for it.
And let me just close with that. What happens, I think that I found the church in Africa is a model for us, because if things happen in the culture politically, they're looked up to help resolve some of the issues. That doesn't happen as much in this country. And you go all the way back to Constantine, when Constantine took, Christianity was not accepted, and Christians were persecuted up until the time of Constantine, when he saw a cross. And I don't want to take the time on that, but you have to watch as to how closely church and state, if one takes over the other, if the two become similar, and the nation is in league with the church, and they do things, and one dominates the other, that's a danger point. And so I'm hoping that helps answer the question. The way America was founded, I believe, if you look at some of the documents, we are to be free to worship wherever we want to. And that causes problems in and of itself. If you look at England, you could look. I have a whole chapter on what happened, called the War of the Fiefdoms, where, if one group got into power, they killed the other group, and that went on for many years. So, I'm hoping that helps answer the question a little bit.
Yeah. And I think of how Tony used to say, Campolo used to say, mixing our faith and politics and political power is kind of like mixing ice cream and horse manure. It doesn't do much damage to the manure, but it really messes up the ice cream. And when we totally sell ourselves out to a political party, or to like the power of politics. But here's the thing, I think what you were saying too, Terry, when I think of like Matthew 25, politicians are not exempt, like they're real people, and they will also be judged on, when I was an immigrant, did you take care of me? When I was a stranger, did you welcome me? When I was in need of health care, what did you cut? Because when you hurt the widows and the orphans, when you hurt the least of these, like, you do it unto Christ. And so there's just no blurring of personal responsibility from the persons who are also holding power in our government, right? There's like, systems don't kill if people don't participate. So whether it's the death penalty or the arming of Israel and the genocide, like, it doesn't just happen without people participating in that.
Well, I was looking back to the question about the immigrants, and the fact that we have gone overboard. It's not to go out and kill people and not hold them responsible for killing. That's wrong. That government should take care of that. And the church's responsibility is the model that we have, is to care for those who are sojourners in our land. That's what Jesus calls us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And yet this particular government wants to get rid of everybody that doesn't look like them. It's often called, Christian nationalism is often called white supremacy. And that's That's happening too. So
Yeah. Well,
okay.
what are you writing next? So this is your latest book, Christian Citizenship, y'all. You got another one in the works?
No, the last thing I wrote to my senator. So
That's good. That sounds good. The last question I wanted to ask you, Terry, is you talked a little bit about community, and a lot of the values we see in the gospel are they're countercultural and they're hard to sustain as just individuals. Like the things like trying not to be materialistic and to share what we have, to be nonviolent. Like it takes community to cultivate and curate these kind of gospel commitments. Jesus lived out community. And in some ways, I know Red Letter Christians has meant a lot to you. You sure have meant a lot to us because you've helped with your gifts and your voice, but you've also put a lot of resources behind this movement. And at the heart of it is really trying to build community that is centered around Jesus. And so I wanted you just to say a little bit more about what community looks like. And I think you find that within your local church, but you also find that within this movement. You're one of the most regular book clubbers I think we have. And it's always just a gift to see
well,
you and be with you.
I did belong to a community called the Community of Celebration for a while. It's in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. It's kind of folded for a while, but that's where I first learned about the sense of community. And in some churches, I found that, and not all of them. Um, I think we've lost that. The church used to be that way. Well, it's not that. A lot of congregations, they go their own way during the week, but it shouldn't be that way. And
Mm.
if you're part of a prayer group, and I belong to a couple of prayer groups, so um, we really need to pray together and stay together and support each other when we're in trouble, and help each other out. So that's
Mm.
that's why I believe in community.
I love it. Well, I look forward to seeing you real soon in October, if not before. And I want to let you have the last word. You can either pray us out or send us out with a little benediction. But let me first say one last book giveaway. If you go to DC on Monday, you don't even have to. I'll just say if you will go to DC and join the Moral Mondays, and let us know. We'll send you a book. Or if you register right now to the Peacemaker Summit, come hang out with Terry and all of us in person. Register tonight, and I don't know, the first two or three folks that tell us you registered, we'll send you a book until we run out. But you can get this on our website. Terry, you are a gift to all of us, and so is your book. Why don't you send us out with a little prayer or a word?
Thank you, Lord, for this time together. Thank you, Lord, for the fellowship and the camaraderie that we have when we know that we are trying to follow Jesus, and that we fail sometimes, but we build each other up and we support each other.
Mm.
I thank you, Lord, for this community, the Red Letter Christians, that are setting the example of what it means to be a Christian in this culture. Give us, each of us that are on this call, the courage to do just one thing each day to make a difference.
Mm. Mm.
Yes, this in your name.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, thanks. Thanks again, Susan and Casey, for helping. Thanks, Brandon, for running the live stream. And Terry, thank you for being our special guest. Join us in 2 days for morning prayer. And
Yeah, I
next,
will.
yeah,
See you then.